Okay, good morning. I continue with our mimer in preparation for Yuchvat. So, trying to understand the idea of God's light that just take it as when a person goes deeper and deeper inside of themselves, you know, the way naturally we would feel a disconnect from that person in how that person is relating to us. So the deeper you go inside of yourself, right, the less you are, you know, engaged outside of yourself, which another person is outside of you. That's the natural way that we would perceive that. So, for example, if uh, a wise teacher, like the Rebbe, right, teaching the pupil, and this is based on the Tzemach Tzedek and what he adds into this discourse. So he has deep wisdom that he wants to transmit. But the teacher's understanding is entirely different than the caliber of the student. And let Liba in, please. Yeah, a completely different caliber. Therefore, in order to transmit this profound wisdom, he has to remove the wisdom entirely from his mind and then generate the wisdom that would be fit for the level of the pupil. Now, when the teacher is putting his understanding on the side, he hasn't erased it. It remains there in its entirety, just temporarily stored away in order to give to the student based on their limited capacity. All right. So that's tzimtzum, that's a contraction, right? All right. The teacher is contracting upon the great wisdom that he has in order to provide for the pupil, for the student. Right. So is there a contraction from the side of the teacher? Right? He didn't remove that knowledge, just contracted it in order to bring now something that the pupil can receive. So he can't reveal everything to the teacher because then the pupil will receive nothing. So that's and all the teacher can reveal is that which is in the capacity of the student to receive. Right. So in this revelation, the teacher's profound understanding isn't perceived. Even a limited version of the teacher's understanding isn't totally perceived. So now, based on this, can understand that the light remains unchanged, right? The light, the way it is by the teacher, hasn't changed. The only reason the light isn't perceived is, so, yesterday we spoke about Moshe Rabbeinu, being a soul of Atzilus, right? So, being a soul of Atzilus, he perceives Atzilus here in this world. And we gave the metaphor. We gave the metaphor of an apple, the sweetness of an apple. For Moshe Rabbeinu, and for all souls, the righteous that come from the world of Atzilus, when they perceive an apple, its sweetness is the sweetness of God's kindness. That's what they perceive. I know that intellectually, but that's not what I experience. Yeah. For me, an apple is an apple. Being that I'm in a soul of Asiya, a lower level soul. So that's what now, what we're explaining over here, in the metaphor of the teacher, right? The light that illuminates in the mind of the teacher hasn't changed. Even after the tzimtzum, after the teacher contracts upon it. Similarly, even as Moshe Rabbeinu is a soul in a body, and he's standing there in front of Pharaoh. Hasn't changed anything in him, in his person. And the only reason it's not perceived, the light of this wisdom for the student, because they just don't have they're not fitting recipients for it. Right? Just like the light of Atzilus that is there by Moses, right? And he's perceiving not the sweetness of the apple in his palate, but the sweetness of God as animating that apple. So by the teacher, the light of the wisdom that he has doesn't change because now he contracts it. It's not like I know it lesser now because I'm bringing it down to the level of the student. Obviously not, right? Now, the previous Rebbe in his discourse goes even further. How about from the perspective of the tzimtzum itself, the contraction itself? Now this is a novelty now, that the previous Rebbe adds to this. And remember, these are metaphors that we're using to understand that the higher you go within God, the more removed and concealed, right? Concealed, hidden is God. But you're going higher and higher, right? And that's because of the contraction. We, right, just think of Einstein playing with a 5-year-old. How much he has to contract upon himself in the sense of his, brilliant mind to play with that 5-year-old. Now, the question is, in the contraction itself, right, from the perspective of the tzimtzum itself, so the Frierdiker Rebbe adds, the tzimtzum is this very refined idea over here. We're speaking now in the contraction itself. It's a contraction. We're not talking about the teacher, right? That the teacher, there is no contraction because the wisdom is there, but he contracts upon it for the sake of the student. But in the contraction itself, says in the previous Rebbe, there's also no change. Well, what do you mean? The idea has been contracted. Why is that? Is because when this great teacher is playing with the little kid and contracting upon his great wisdom, and in that play, trying to impart something to the child, right? The ultimate intent of the teacher is to guide the student to think the way the teacher thinks. Whoa. The only reason the teacher temporarily conceals the idea is to make it accessible for the student. Now, it's going to take a lot of effort of the student, but if in other words, the student's getting the core essence of the teacher. Now, you're going to have to work hard in order to reach the same depth of understanding as a teacher, but it's all there. And the only reason the contraction is in order so that the student should become like the teacher. So what the teacher is only doing is drawing a simplified form in a way that the student can relate to. So, is explaining quantum mechanics to a 5-year-old the way the 5-year-old can. Eventually, the 5-year-old should be able to come and understand it the way that the teacher understands it. Now, it'll take some time, but that's the intent of a profound, right? The only difference is that when it's being taught, the profundity of the teacher isn't perceived. Even a limited version of the teacher's understanding isn't perceived. But only then will the teacher's intent eventually, the pupil, the student will get to the same understanding as he does. And he'll be like the teacher. Because that's what the teacher really wants. He wants that the student should be like him. So what we see is that in the contraction, what seems to be concealment, since the intent is really that the student should get everything and become everything like the teacher, in the contraction itself, the removal itself is there is no change. There is no change. So not only there's no change from the perspective of the light the way it is by the teacher, but even from the contraction, the tzimtzum, the darkness, there's no concealment. Hence, the entire depth of the teacher's knowledge is found within the tzimtzum, within it. Within that contraction, the entire depth is there. And the entire purpose of the tzimtzum is that eventually the student will be able to reach the level of the teacher's understanding. So, it's very heavy. Again, it's only in order that the student to reach a teacher's depth, the concealment is necessary. Therefore, it's understood that the tzimtzum doesn't affect any real change. It only appears as so to the pupil's, student's perspective. The teacher, however, sees the tzimtzum, how it enables the pupil to reach his full understanding. So in the beginning, the full complexity is only in potential, but afterwards when the pupil will recognize the full profundity of the teacher's wisdom, and also how it was all packed into concise words of the teacher, then it will be actualized. So, in other words, again, so since the whole point of bringing it down, right, is in order that the student should finally get it on that level and then grow and finally get it completely. So the contraction is really revealing. In other words, even though there's no revelation there, right, it's ultimately in the contraction, the light itself, there is no change. So same thing as with the light of God that seems to be concealed. Because remember, the way the student is getting it, very concealed compared to the way it is in the teacher. In that concealment, you're getting the teacher. Not only the teacher, we get not only the core essence, but the light of the teacher. So what does that mean for us? It means in the difficulty and where we are going through the darkness. Darkness is only, which is a contraction of the light of God. In the darkness, you have there, right, in that contraction, right, that the light of God isn't revealed. You're getting God himself and his light. That which you're getting him. All right, to be continued.
Thanks, Rabbi.
There's not going to be a Chumash Rashi at this point, but Tanya, God willing, and Rambam based schedule. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi. Safe travels to you.